8 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure the orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. In the language of your choice. As you know, interpretation services are available for the meeting. Please select your preference at the bottom of your screen. Again, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, and that all comments by members should be addressed through the chair. Of course, when you're not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. As is my normal practice, I will hold up the yellow card for when you have 30 seconds remaining in your intervention, and I will hold up the red card for when your intervention time has expired. Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021, in the first hour of the INDU committee meeting, we will be meeting to begin our study of Bill C-272, an act to amend the Copyright Act, diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. I'd like to now welcome our witnesses to INDU. We have with us today Mr. Brian May, Member of Parliament for Cambridge and the sponsor for the bill. And with that, we will allow the member to present his bill for 5 minutes. MP May, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you for the invitation to speak on C-272, my private member's bill. Most importantly, thanks to everyone who voted for the bill at second reading, bringing the bill here to INDU committee. I look forward to hearing your questions and discussing the bill. As you know, the bill passed second reading with unanimous support in the House and has garnered interest and support from individuals, businesses, and environmental and technological activists from across the country and in fact internationally. I trust that you all recognize the significance of this bill and realize its potential as I have. I want to say that I am happy to discuss amendments and ways to strengthen this bill, and I hope that there is ample opportunity for me to hear your thoughts on the legislation. C-272 addresses some concerns that the Copyright Act is being used and interpreted in areas far beyond its scope. In particular, the provisions of copyright that are actually able to prevent the repair of digital devices and systems, even when nothing is being copied or distributed, and where the owner actually owns the device. The Copyright Act contains certain mechanisms that make it impossible or extremely difficult for consumers to repair their own goods. Technological protection measures, or TPMs, are used to protect the intellectual property found in devices. TPMs can inadvertently prevent repairs and can shut out independent repair shops, home DIY repairs, and replacement of simple parts. This system can even prevent repairs after the company has gone out of business, because breaking TPMs would still be illegal even if the company wasn't making the product any longer, and there were literally no other options for repair or replacement. This goes against everything that Canadians understand instinctively when they purchase something. As technology becomes more sophisticated, and with the introduction of digital systems integrated into these products, there are technological protection measures which are embedded by the Copyright Act, which can prevent any repairs, even simple ones, which should be able to be completed by consumers. If passed into law, this bill could change the repair landscape entirely. Imagine when your smart appliance breaks down. You would not have to wait for a licensed repair person with the TPM bypassing passwords or tools to come to your house. You could order the part yourself, install it yourself, or hire another company to do it for you. This keeps the control of the product in the consumer's hands and reduces the manufacturer's ability to leverage their product long after it has been sold, which is not only inappropriate, but also anti-competitive. And a case could be made for those acts to be illegal under Canada Anti-Competition Act. As a result, Canadians would not have to face the dilemma of throwing out their quality and sometimes new products as a result of a small malfunction. This would have drastic effects on our waste and would increase our ability to work efficiently with our smart devices. I'm aware that other private members' bills have been brought forward in the past to address concerns about right to repair. Please be aware that this bill is substantially different in structure and design, and that's on purpose. I've aimed to carve out a very specific and limited allowance for consumers to circumvent a TPM, but only for the purpose of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. I'm well aware of the legislation that must be moved by the provinces to address some other components of right to repair, including availability of spare parts, mandating repair manual availability, instituting additional measures to protect consumers, and regulations on the sale of goods which do not allow for repair. The key here is that C272 is that it's a precursor to many of these other items, because without a change to the Copyright Act, those other legislation and regulatory changes will not have their desired effect, as TPMs cannot be bypassed for repair. This bill is important because it's not a matter of if, but when this legislation will be required. Legislation for right to repair has been considered at the provincial level, is in place or being written in the EU and across multiple jurisdictions in the United States. With our shared interest of avoiding waste and keeping consumers in control of their own products, we must make room for repair. Thank you for your time today, Madam Chair, and I would be happy to answer any of the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP May. We're happy to have you here at INDU. With that, we'll start our round of questions. Our first 6-minute round goes to MP Polyev. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. May. I've carefully read your bill, and frankly, I think you've got it right. I think there are two extremes on this in this debate. One is that the government would, as we do now under the copyright, to respect the exclusive repair rights of the vendor, and the other is to ban the vendor from applying technological protections. What you've done is you've done neither of those things. What you've done is basically remove the prohibition on circumvention technology to allow those customers who want to go to attempt to repair something themselves and to attempt to go around a technological protection measure. And by the amendment to the Copyright Act you propose, effectively, I think you are legislating the principle of willing buyer, willing seller. And I think that's where we need to be on this. Did you want to? That's more of a comment than a question. I invite your response to it.
Thank you, Mr. Polyev. I agree. This is not an overreach. This is actually my second opportunity to present a private member's bill in the House, and I learned a lot in the first go around. And when we drafted this bill, we wanted to make sure, one, it was broad. I had no delusions of grandeur that it would receive unanimous support in the House, but I was very pleased to see that. But also that it would support all Canadians, and it would be a step in the right direction. I think a lot of times private members' bills are drafted trying to get across that finish line, and when we came across this issue, very, very quickly realized that's not how this is going to work. We need to take a step forward and give the provinces the opportunity to determine, what the landscape of right to repair is going to look like for them. And I think this bill does that. I think this bill is reasonable. It has an approach that, as you say, Mr. Polyev, is fair. And I think that's, quite frankly, why we were able to achieve that unanimous support in the House.
Right. So there's nothing in the bill, for example, that would ban a vendor from including a clause in a warranty agreement that requires the buyer to bring the product in question back to the vendor for repair and maintenance. That would still be allowed under this bill, would it not?
Yeah, this bill does not get into the architecture of what a right to repair landscape is going to look like. This allows for that conversation to be had at the provincial level.
Right, and at the same time, if a vendor puts in place a technological protection that would attempt to prevent the consumer from repairing the product themselves. What this would do is say the consumer can try to get around that technological protection and repair their own at their own risk, and then it really becomes a decision for the customer on whether or not to respect the technological measure put in place by this vendor, or to try and find some way around it. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, this bill specifically carves out that exemption within the Copyright Act, so that breaking a TPM for the purposes of diagnosis, maintenance, and repair is not illegal
right.
in Canada.
But it doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't prevent vendors from putting in place those protections that keep customers from repairing the product.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think there's no perfect world here, but at the end of the day, what you've said is, I think what your bill does is it allows the customer to say, listen, this is the technological protection that the vendors put in place to prevent me from repairing my product. I can decide whether or not I want to buy it, given that it has that protection, or the vendor wants to put in place a requirement in warranty that I bring my tractor or smartphone back to him for repair, and I can look at that warranty agreement, and if I don't like it, I can go shop somewhere else. But at the end of the day, the government's not going to ban me from attempting to go around the vendor and repairing the product myself. That's sort of a summary of what effect this would have.
Yeah, it really touches on the fact that the Copyright Act has been used in a way that it was never intended. Right. So as you know, when we had a refrigerator, 20 years ago, and a compressor went on that refrigerator, you could fix it without having to break the Copyright Act. Now that compressor is attached to a motherboard that has a technological protection measure in it that doesn't even allow you to replace the part that has nothing to do with the technology side. And I think this is where time and the development of these smart devices has required a rethink. And look, the industries, they have figured out a way to use the Copyright Act to their benefit, but it was never intended that way.
No, in fact, and if I could conclude, I know I'm out of time, but I don't think this is copyright. I mean, if someone was trying to break into the machine to copy the intellectual property and create their own similar machine and sell it, stealing the IP of the vendor, that would be one thing. But what you're talking about here is just letting them to repair that machine. So I agree with you that the section you're removing never really belonged in the Copyright Act. So anyway, good work on your part. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Polyev. We'll now go to MP Johari. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to my colleague, MP May. Welcome to our committee, and thank you for the great work that you're doing in your writing and on the legislative side. I was one of the fortunate MPs who managed to interview the bill when it was introduced in the House. And what I found interesting, and I would ask you to explore for us, was the saving that's associated with the cost of maintenance, the total cost of the equipment, and it's under the consumer through the right to repair legislation. Can you give the committee an estimate around the potential cost savings through this legislation?
Thank you for the question, MP Johari. I do not have specific data regarding savings on this. I think that it's a very good question, but it's a question that we, hopefully, if we have other witnesses appear on this subject from industry, that might be able to better answer that question. I think that the the obvious reality is that consumers make their choices based on a lot of different factors, but the number one choice they make is based on price and cost. And we know that if something is cheaper to replace than it is to fix, then we'd rather have the new one and goes, the other one goes out to the curb for the dump. And I think that's what we're seeing here is a system that allows the manufacturer of that device to control the cost of repair. And so it's in their interest to make that cost of repair so significant that somebody is consciously looking at the cost versus replace, or repair versus replace, and they're looking to replace it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and this is really goes to the next step of this bill, which is of course the environmental focus. But please.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with you. We're in our household. We're dealing with a dilemma. We have moved to our house about 22 years ago. The washer dryer that we've got is an older version, but we have the flexibility to be able to repair it because it's a lot of mechanical parts. We're looking to replace it with a newer model, which is enhanced electronically, and it helps us with more energy efficiency. But when we look at the warranty and we look at if we need to repair it, basically we have to either replace half of the machine, or we got to go look at the new one. So the cost saving is not only as it relates to the repair, but also relate to other efficiencies that you would be able to gain by upgrading to a newer model and being able to benefit from electrical efficiency, energy efficiency.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that there's research out there, and I'm afraid I don't have it at my fingertips, but there is research out there that shows that that's a bit of a misnomer in some cases, not in all cases. But we know that the energy that it requires to produce the new product is significant, and quite frankly, in Ontario, the efficiency of the energy that's produced to provided to run that device has in fact become a lot better. And so they've shortened that gap as well. Yeah. So I think that the advantage of replacing something because it's more energy efficient definitely is a factor, but not nearly as much as the cost of a repair of that device.
Yeah, I just want to, you mentioned that this bill has taken some international attention. I'd really like to get your input around how would this bill affect our nation's compliance with the international treaties such as the CUSMA and the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, Copyright Treaty, which provides protection on TPMs.
Yeah, and I thank you for that question. It's one that I've heard raised, but I haven't actually discovered what the challenge would in fact be. I know we've clearly have to do our due diligence and make sure that we're not in some kind of breach of a treaty or trade agreement. But I will point out that both the U.S., the EU, and other countries are in fact in the process of doing moving forward on legislation like this. In fact, in the EU, they're setting new standards for repairability and ensuring that packaging clearly marks where a product can or cannot be repaired. So again, that's further down the line when it comes to what the landscape will look like as per the provincial, any further provincial measures and legislation and regulations that are passed. But this is happening, and I think we need to be prepared. And one of the ways we can be prepared is to eliminate the barrier of copyright so that the provinces can move forward appropriately.
Thank you, and that's my time.
Thank you very much. Our next 6-minute round goes to Député Lemire. Vous avez la parole.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this bill. And I supported it in the House and spoke in the House, and I really liked the question asked by Mr. Johari on the environmental issues. I think we could delve into this further. But when you talked about planned obsolescence, could you speak to this and how this act is being used by companies in their favor right now with regards to planned obsolescence?
Thank you very much for the question. I apologize. I will have to respond in English. My French, I'm working on it, but it is not nearly good enough to present here today. The environmental side of this was a huge motivator for me to want to move on this private members bill. Clearly, we will see less waste, less e-waste. As we allow for more items to be repaired. We see a huge growing desire for sort of the DIY culture. You know, you can go on YouTube and learn how to fix almost anything. And I think that is something we want to instill in our culture. I know that I have two children. I teach them as much as I possibly can on how to, fix things and repair things on their own. It's not just the right thing to do from an environmental perspective, but it's a skill that we're potentially losing in our generations. But I think the question about planned obsolescence is one that we see this all the time. My mother-in-law has a washer dryer from the 60s, and it's still running perfectly fine. She had to replace a fan belt on one of them a couple of years ago, and it's running perfectly fine. We don't see that anymore. We see devices that are designed to ultimately fail, and that's a choice from a manufacturing perspective, but it's also been driven by consumers, and I think we have to recognize this is something again. Won't be solved by this private members bill, but potentially provincial legislation and regulation around providing requiring manufacturers to provide parts or manuals or things like that in order to repair some of these devices. I think that we need to look at that a little bit deeper in terms of how we move forward, but I agree with you, sir. The idea of planned obsolescence is a challenge, but it won't be solved by this bill.
On voit que c'est une question qui vous
I see that this is something that you take to heart. On the cost side, there's always an environmental cost if you don't do anything. Have you measured how much it costs us in garbage? And with this bill, if we were able to repair, for example, a washer or dryer or other electronic equipment, how much public monies would be saved rather than sending all of this to landfill sites or to recycling centers? In the United States, for example, if we follow the work that was done in the past.
Again, the other question we had about the actual costs associated with this, I would have to defer to industry experts, which I hope you will call to witness on this bill. But I just common sense would suggest that it would be significant. We know that waste and waste management is a, if not the biggest challenge for our municipalities and regions, it's up there. And we know that the cost is significant. We're looking at this from an environmental perspective. We're looking at this from a consumer rights perspective, but we also need to look at this in terms of an affordability perspective, in terms of what Canadians are spending their money on, and if they're not spending it on a new appliance, what then could they do? Could they pay down their debt? Could they, save for retirement? Could they put help their kids through school? There's a whole bunch of other aspects to this, a ripple effect that could result. And I'm excited by, what is to come. Hopefully, this bill does have enough runway to see royal assent. Maybe not, but again, given that it was unanimously supported in the House, maybe the minister may choose to pick it up as well.
La balle est dans le camp du gouvernement là-dessus sur les élections.
The ball is in the government's court with regards to elections, but you say that C-262 is a precursor. What other act could be amended also to ensure longer life for our products? And you said that there are many bills in the past that might not have been passed, but what was your inspiration with regards to bills that were passed or maybe that weren't passed?
So I think there's, if I'm understanding your question, there's a number of things that have been attempted in the past, but this issue of copyright would still have been a barrier. It would still have been illegal for those pieces of legislation to pass. I think, in terms of why, what was the motivation, quite frankly, seeing my children growing up in a more digitized, world and seeing the need for this growing every single year. And I see my time.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Our next round of questions goes to MP Massé. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. May, for your work here on this bill. We support as New Democrats. In fact, we would go much farther. In fact, in 2009, my private member's bill passed in the House 247 to 18 on the automotive aftermarket, and it's now a voluntary agreement. The then Minister Clement was able to work with the industry, being the automotive sector and the aftermarket, and that agreement actually needs to be updated as well too. So what would you suggest in terms of this bill here too that would advance? I guess it's not just the rights for consumers, the environment you noticed as well too. Consumer protectionism is there. But what would you suggest would be your message to all those innovators out there that once you purchase a product and you understand the warranty, and if you actually do undermine the warranty, but still you don't become a criminal for actually purchasing a product and then adapting it or changing it or improving it or innovating it, I think this is a key point that we shouldn't be lost.
Thank you, MP Massey. I agree with you. I think that there is a real potential to open up a lot of different industries with a proper right to repair legislation, and thank you for the work that you've done in the past. I along with MP Longfield, chair the Auto Caucus on the Liberal side, and we've talked a lot about the auto industry in relation to right to repair. And you're absolutely correct. It was a voluntary agreement. It's worked well. It's not perfect. There's a number of holes in it, but it has, and it definitely needs to be updated. We're seeing companies like Tesla, of course, not following that voluntary agreement. A lot of companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz don't follow that agreement. And we can use the auto industry, though, for those that are concerned, in terms of stakeholders that might be harmed by something like this. It clearly has not harmed the auto industry. And what it has done is it's spun off a whole bunch of other options, whether it's independent mechanics, parts providers, service providers, and I think this could be what you would see in a right to repair for digital devices. I think that you would absolutely see that space starting to fill, and making sure that the people have those choices and options.
It's important to recognize your focus to some degree on electronic waste, something that we haven't been doing the best job of, as our landfills and other types of disposal systems aren't as robust as they probably should be in the market. And interesting to the auto sector is, we think about the environment and we think about the rights and all those things, but also there was a public safety issue too, because vehicles would be on the road and not be in the best condition traveling to waiting for repairs and so forth, so it gets complex. But with regards to electronic waste, and going back to that point, Can you indicate whether you've had some discussions or with third-party groups on that? And I know that some of this is municipal because that's where some of it ends up, but has there been any work done on that part of the program and platform yet?
With regard to electronic waste?
Yes, and kind of measuring what could be improved upon or reduced. Has there been any third parties that have jumped to your quarters just yet? I mean, it's a little bit early still, but I'm just wondering whether or not some groups have kind of latched on.
We've had a number of stakeholders reach out to us, virtually the entirety of which have been supportive of this bill. A lot of them around the environmental components of this and the reduction of waste in landfills. We know that a lot of incubators or groups that are trying to figure out new ways to do things are working on this kind of stuff. In fact, just down the street from where I am right now is a brand new incubator called Grand River Innovation, and their almost entire focus is on dealing with the what they call the new waste. People are throwing out, for the first time, a large flat screen TV. So how does the industry break that down? How do they separate the precious metals versus the recyclables to things that have to go in landfill? This is what the work that they're trying to work on right now. Things like batteries, technology designed to sort and recycle small batteries. These are all things that I've talked to different groups on in terms of what they're working on. What this bill is going to attempt to do is reduce the incredible load of waste that is heading their way, and trying to manage that. This, of course, is going to be driven by the consumer, but again, it comes down to cost. If something is cheaper to repair than it is to replace, people will likely make that choice.
Well, thank you very much for your work on this. It's appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now start our second round of questions. Our first round goes to Député Généreux.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci, mon collègue.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague that's applauding me. I'm not sure why, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. May, for being here today. We're mainly talking about obsolescence, planned obsolescence. We talked about the environment and things like this, and this has an impact. Will your bill allow for the reduction of material that might have a longer lifespan? Could you extend the lifespan of products? And this will also help the environment if people can keep products for a longer period of time. When objects become obsolete because of rules that make it so that people don't want to repair products, but rather, instead of keeping products and repairing them, they're thrown away and discarded. And so this does not help the environment, of course. So does your bill have any impact on this?
So thank you very much for the question. As I said earlier in a previous question, no, my bill does not, in fact, do that. What it is the first step that could lead to that type of legislation, that could allow the provinces to move forward with different regulations around manufacturing, part availability, manual access to different manuals. That doesn't get affected by this bill. That would be an overreach with this private member's bill. What this bill simply does is allow for a circumvention of the TPMs around diagnosis, maintenance, and repair. And so with that, it opens up, and of course I agree with you. The outcome that we would like to see as a result of this private members bill could in fact be those things that you discussed, but this bill specifically does not snap your fingers and make that all happen. That would all be up to the different jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions, to determine for themselves what that right to repair landscape is going to look like.
Avec les ententes, on sait qu'on a des 50 traités de libre-échange.
We know that we have free trade agreements throughout the world. Is there any direct or indirect impact stemming from your bill on these agreements? And another thing that concerns me, this is a private member's bill used to change or to improve rules. Why is this not a government-led bill?
To answer your first question, I have heard this concern that it could have an impact on trade agreements, but I have yet to see how it would impact trade agreements. There would definitely need to be a look at see how that, but there's been nobody has shown me to say here's a line within CUSMA, for example, that this would be problematic for. And that's why I'm open to amendments to make sure that is not a barrier to this bill moving forward. The second part of your question, I don't speak for the minister. I've said in earlier remarks that if this bill can't move forward because it doesn't have the runway to go through the process before the next election, the next best option is that the ministry pick it up and move it. No, I can't speak for the minister as to why this hasn't been done previously.
Ça va être tout pour moi, Madame la Présidente.
That's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Beaucoup. Normalement, vous me chicanez parce que je vous coupe, mais là, vous avez laissé un peu.
You left a little bit of time on the table. Madam Chair, I have a lot of respect for you. I'm not going to cut into you like Mr. Poliev. No, I'm just joking.
Move to the next round of questions. Our next round goes to MP Assassi. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Mr. May. You have done a magnificent job on this bill. I know that you care deeply about changing the repair landscape and that you've always championed consumer rights. Now, just to put this in perspective, as I understand it, this will be hugely transformative for the agricultural sector as well. Could you provide us with a few examples so everyone understands the implications of your bill and how it will assist individuals in the agricultural sector?
I really appreciate that question. This is something that was, again, one of the reasons we moved forward with this bill. I am the member of Parliament for Cambridge, and I'm seen by many as an urban member of Parliament. But in reality, if you look at my riding map, like 70% of my riding is actually rural. And this is a really big issue with the farmers in my community and across Canada, and we've heard from many of them who, as time has gone by and they've replaced certain pieces of equipment, been replaced with equipment that has these digital components in it, and as a result, they can't so much as replace a tire on a combine because there's a sensor in that tire that is connected to the motherboard, that is connected to the GPS, that identifies that there's a problem with that tire, and the culture and I'm one generation away from being born on a farm, and I can tell you the culture is to fix your own stuff. It is not just a point of pride for the agricultural sector. It's a necessity. There's a lot of people who are in rural communities, not like Cambridge, that are close enough to urban centers. They can maybe drive or get a technician to come out to the farm easily. But there's a lot of our farmers across Canada that don't have access to technicians to come out, and they need to be able to fix their own stuff. And I've read stories and seen articles and talked to farmers about, having to put tractors on trains to send them away to be repaired. and that is not only incredibly expensive for farmers, but it is debilitating in our ability to produce the food that we need for this country. And I know that there was a push in the United States specifically towards John Deere to identify and provide a way around these TPMs for farmers. And they put on a push with the lobby effort to against the legislation, and agreed to a voluntary measure. Now that measure was supposed to be provided by John Deere on January 2021, and we have yet to see that measure in place. So voluntary agreements are great if they are done. Historically, it's not been the case in this industry. And I think that as we move forward, these everything from combines to simple tractors and other devices, they're all connected in some way, shape, or form to these technological protection measures. And there is nothing about copyright that would be infringed for a farmer to be able to replace a tire on a combine.
Absolutely. So, given some of the expressions of concern that we've heard and you alluded to, which essentially relates to our obligations under CUMSA or under WIPO, for all those people who are flagging that specific concern, how do we insulate against retaliatory action under these agreements? Is there anything we could do to mitigate that risk?
So I see I amount of answer that question. Again, I would defer to, if you're going to have departmental officials come to speak to this bill at some point in the future, that's a question that I would pose to them. I have yet to see where in CUSMA or any of the agreements this would be a problem. I know, like I said, I agree with the department. We need to make sure we're doing our due diligence on this, but it would be up to the department to be able to give that information. I personally have not seen where that issue would be.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Député Lemire. Vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes et demie.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. May, from the onset, you spoke to 4 or 5 elements that could have an impact with regards to legislation in the provinces. How can we not be having an impact on different jurisdictions? If I think of the Office of the Consumer Affairs in Quebec, have you contacted them?
No, again, I haven't spoken directly to the individual provinces about this. This is not about creating a bill that the provinces will have to adhere to. This is about removing a roadblock that the provinces currently have enabled that doesn't allow them to move forward if they so choose. They don't have to, but if they so choose, they can move forward on legislation or regulations around consumer protection, around the right to repair, because the technological protection measures exist within the Copyright Act. Anything that the provinces do until that is changed would run up against those legal challenges, and all this bill is trying to do is remove that barrier in order for the provinces to be able to make those choices. Now, what choices they do make. I know that there have been there was a private member's bill or a piece of legislation that was moving by a former Liberal member of Parliament here in Ontario that failed. And one of the reasons it failed or was challenged was because the technological protection measures within copyright still existed. So I think my motivation, my hope is that the provinces see this as an opportunity to be able to move forward, to be able to recognize the benefits to their citizens by creating that regulation or legislation around the right to repair.
Parlant de lever les obstacles, est-ce que vous pensez qu'il peut y avoir une opportunité?
When we talk about removing obstacles, do you think there would be possibilities for business development so that machine repair could be expanded? For example, Apple, you have to go to the company. Do you think this can create opportunities in the regions for repair businesses?
Very quickly, yes.
Merci.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Massey. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Madam Chair, go ahead and answer that question, Mr. May. I really don't have any more questions, but I'll give you an opportunity to finish the last one. That was a good question by my colleague. Yeah. So.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that you brought up Apple, and this is probably one of the biggest targets with things like this. You can't you can't replace even a screen on something like this, even if the part is available and the person has the know-how. You don't have the ability to do that. They're very pernicious in how they've set up some of these systems, not just the TPMs, but the requirements for things like passwords and tools that will unlock a device in order for the repair to even be done. I'll give you an example of PlayStation. Right. So PlayStation has two major components to it. It has the disk drive and it has the motherboard. Now, if the disk drive were to fail for some reason, and you're able to take a disk drive from another PlayStation that maybe has another problem with it, or able to find that part online somewhere, and you have the know-how to replace that part in the PlayStation, the motherboard will not recognize the perfectly fine working disk drive because the serial numbers will not match up. That has nothing to do with privacy, or that has nothing to do with copyright, I should say. And so these are the types of things that manufacturers have done using copyright legislation as a shield. And even if you have the know-how, the parts at hand, you still cannot get that device to function because of the way they have set that up to not allow for it to work.
As a PlayStation gamer, I really appreciate that example. It's actually perfect. It's a really good example. Thank you.
Well, it's one of those things where this. I think people across Canada, when they're starting to learn about right to repair, they're thinking about their own examples. They're thinking about, oh yeah, I had to do this or I had to do that, and this was a pain in the butt, and this cost me a fortune to have a guy come out to do something I could have done myself. And I think this is where this is getting that broad appeal because everybody has an example like that.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions will go to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP May, for bringing this very timely legislation to us. Of course, my relaxation is driving a tractor, so I'm quite familiar with the significance of what is being asked, and of course, when you take a look at things like your DEF emissions control modules, when they start to go down, it's not like an air conditioner where maybe you could open the windows. That shuts it down. So and you only have a small time frame where you can actually do the work that you require. And one of the examples that I had was from a constituent. They have about a 1,200 acre farm around Olds, and quite frankly, their average repair costs are probably $75,000 a year, and of course that's not all related to the types of things that you're discussing, but it does show the significance of the cost of repairs, and I think that really becomes a critical aspect of it. But the thing that we depend upon, of course, are the great repair shops that we have in our communities, where they can basically, whenever you have trouble, they know how to fix it. And so this becomes one of those issues that I think we really have to pay attention to. But one of the things we've heard, of course, is from equipment dealers and manufacturers in the past, and they've said that the right to repair argument is more about demanding the right to make these illegal modifications to farm equipment. So I'm just wondering if you can, because no doubt we're going to hear a lot about that issue. So I wonder if you could just speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, and I've heard this argument as well, and I think we have to recognize where this argument is coming from. And I think that the idea that somebody is going to modify a piece of equipment that would be dangerous or inappropriate, I think is not realistic. I think we've seen this within the auto industry. I think people that are going to repair something and want to repair something, they either have the skill to do it or they don't. And if they don't, they take it to somebody who does. And what this bill will do it will allow that consumer to choose where they take that device or piece of equipment to be repaired, right? It allows for them to not have to necessarily go to a one single source person who can set the price and there's nothing you can do about it. And we look at the auto industry as an example. I have the comfort level to replace oil in my car. And not anymore, but I used to be able to feel comfortable, going as far as replacing the brakes. But if all of a sudden the transmission goes, I'm not going to take that thing apart and try to fix it myself. I'm going to take that to somebody who is trained and has the know-how to do that. I think we have the comments about, it's going to lead to this or it's going to lead to that is really disrespectful to the average consumer who clearly doesn't want to take on a project, something, that would either be harmful to them or potentially destroy the piece of equipment that they have.
And I think too, though, one of the questions, of course, if you happen to have a particular brand of a combine, but you wanted to put a different header on it, I think that's where some of these other companies are saying, you know what, we have a great product as well, but we're going to have a little bit of difficulty being able to link up there, or potentially have a problem linking up with this product that we would like to be able to sell. And I think that really becomes one of the issues that people in the ag arena speak about. One of the other things, though, that you spoke about was the environmental aspects of it, and the fact that when things become obsolete or the planned obsolescence, these things have to be dealt with. And if you can keep them out of landfills, well, that's important. I guess I have a little different idea as far as landfill. I look at all of the solar panels, that waste that we're going to have, and everything else as we work in certain directions. I think it's important that we do a full life cycle analysis of all of the products that we're going to be producing, no matter what the scenario. And the fact that you are addressing that is important. So I appreciate that. I don't know if I have enough time to have you quickly comment on that, but I'd appreciate that.
I'm not sure that I have the time. Madam Chair's got the red tag up there, but I will say, that's again beyond this bill. That'll be future legislation. This is simply removing that barrier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last round will go to MP Lambropoulos. You have the floor.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP May, for bringing forward this legislation, and happy we're discussing it here. I think it's great because a lot of middle-class Canadians and people can't necessarily afford to replace things necessarily, or to go back to the company to get it fixed at the expensive rates at which that might be. So I think it's great that you're doing this, and that I hope it does get unanimous consent going forward, that it gets full support going forward. I do have questions, though. I know that some companies purposely create these barriers and make it so that certain technologies get outdated, right? So I know that cell phones, for example, iPhones. Every couple of years, they changed the technology and the software so that you can no longer use the same charger, or so that you could no longer, when you update your phone, it just slows down and eventually phases out. Do you think that this is going to have an impact on how companies moving forward will continue to do this, or will they try to make it even more difficult for people to be able to repair things on their own?
I think it's a good question, but I think this is the difference between what is the idea of the philosophy of manufacturing in general. We are simply saying with this bill that you have the right. It's no longer against the law to circumvent a TPM in order to repair, replace, or diagnose a situation. What you're talking about, and what others have talked about today in terms of that sort of planned obsolescence, these are business decisions, and consumers are also going to look at, okay, I can effectively, replace the part in my phone, or replace the part in this device or that device, but this device has got this new innovation, and I want that. Right. And so that always is a contributing factor in that consumer decision. And this isn't going to slow that down at all. Industry is going to continue to innovate, continue to bring out new products with more conveniences. I personally don't really find that kind of thing. My lawnmower, for example, has literally nothing on it that is a perk, if you will. But you almost have to go searching for something like that now, something that's basic, that someone like myself can repair on their own. There are so many little features that industry are adding to products to make life easier, to add more convenience to this device or that device. The whole smart concept, the whole 5G connecting everything, the fact that your toaster is going to be 5G in the future. Refrigerators already have that kind of capacity to say, when you're out of milk and things like that. We have to recognize that type of innovation is not going to slow down just simply because somebody has the right to repair their own device. What we are looking at really is for industry to acknowledge that using the Copyright Act is simply not the way to do this. I mean, if provinces want industry to be protected in that way, fine. They need to pass a law to say that, not simply use the Copyright Act as that shield in a way that it was never intended to.
Thank you. No further questions.
Well, thank you so much, MP May, for being with us today. I think this is incredibly important legislation, and we are looking forward to hearing more about it when we resume in the fall. And I want to thank you for being here today and being very clear on the need. It is obvious that this is something that consumers need and consumers want, and given environmental concerns, given concerns of pricing, I think this is a really good idea. So with that, we will suspend momentarily while we allow the next panel to join and do some sound checks, and we will allow Mr. May to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, everybody.
Merci.
So I won't go over the normal procedures, as I know our witnesses were with us a little earlier. Just a gentle reminder though, when you do see the little yellow card, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. The red card means the time is up. So with that, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, June 3rd, 2021, the committee is meeting to begin a study of the Order in Council appointment of Monique Gomel, interim chairperson of the Canadian Tourism Commission. Today we have with us Madame Monique Gomel, interim chair of the Board of Directors, and Ms. Marcia Walden, president and CEO. So we will allow you to present for 5 minutes, after which we will go to rounds of questions. With that, I turn the floor over to you.
Great. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak to the committee today. My name is Monique Gomel, and I am the interim chair of Destination Canada's Board of Directors. I'm joined by Marcia Walden, president and CEO of Destination Canada. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Vancouver, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. J'ai été nommée présidente intérimaire en mars de cette année.
I was appointed interim chair of Destination Canada's board, and I've been vice chair of the board since 2017. I'm also a senior VP at Rocky Mountaineer, where I oversee global marketing, communications, data and insights, and sales operations.
Brief overview of my role as interim chair, the state of the tourism sector in Canada, and Destination Canada's near and longer term plans. First, as interim chair of the board, I work collaboratively with a team of 8 directors with tourism experience, from small business owners to renowned entrepreneurs to former executives from multinational corporations. The government has appointed some of Canada's best and brightest tourism business leaders to help provide strategic advice to the executive team and the president and CEO of Destination Canada. Directors are actively involved in long-term strategic planning, prioritization of objectives, financial oversight, and risk management. The board assures itself that appropriate systems of governance, leadership, and stewardship are in place while empowering the executive team to manage the organization. Avant de donner un aperçu de l'état du secteur.
Before I provide an overview of the state of the sector as a whole, I would like to share my perspective as an operator. In my role as Senior Vice President of Rocky Mountaineer, a Canadian luxury rail company, I am seeing firsthand the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic on our business. We were not able to operate in 2020 and have delayed the start of our 2021 season.
Tourism is greater than that experienced after 9/11, SARS, and the 2008 crisis combined. Women, youth, immigrants, and Indigenous workers, who make up the engine of the visitor economy, have been the hardest hit by the impact of COVID-19 due to reduced operations, business closures, and job losses. We are forecasting that the sector will not return until 2024. À ce stade de ma présentation, je tiens à souligner que la...
At this point, I would like to acknowledge that the speed and scale of government response has never before been seen.
$15 billion in federal government investments to support tourism in the past year. This includes important programs like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program and the Highly Affected Sectors Credit Availability Program. There was also robust support for Canada's tourism sector in Budget 2021, which I will note still needs to pass the House and the Senate, including an additional $100 million to Destination Canada for marketing. While government subsidy programs are helpful for survival, recovery can only happen when revenues return. Or, la bonne nouvelle, c'est que...
The good news is that although the sector is struggling now, we are seeing strong signals of future demand. Our latest research shows upward trends in terms of people feeling safe to travel, as well as increasing levels of welcome towards visitors to their communities.
Canada is focusing its strategy to help revive market revenue in the near term and support a thriving and resilient industry that delivers net benefits to communities in the long term. A key part of our plan to revive revenue is a multi-phased domestic campaign that reflects the evolution of health restrictions. Recent research from Destination Canada finds that if Canadians shift 2/3 of their typical spending to international travel towards domestic tourism this year, it will make up for the estimated $19 billion shortfall in international visitation. It will also support 150,000 jobs and help accelerate recovery by a full year. Simply put, we need Canadians to keep their holiday dollars in Canada this year to speed up our sector's recovery. In its early stages, our campaign aims to increase Canadians' understanding of the importance of travel to their communities, inspire confidence and a desire to travel domestically, and finally, reignite the welcoming spirit of Canadians from coast to coast. While our industry is first and foremost concerned with protecting the health of our employees and guests, we are eager to welcome travelers again. So when the time is right, we will start introducing more aggressive calls to action and encouraging Canadians to book their travel. We are also key in our international markets, ensuring that Canada stays top of mind for business and leisure travel alike when it's safe to do so. The efforts are now intensifying. In order to help our industry ready themselves to reopen and compete in a ferocious marketplace, we are hearing three main areas of concern. They are seeking clarity around reopening milestones.
Could you conclude? I'll give you a few more minutes to conclude if you could. Thank you.
Thank you. They're seeking clarity around reopening milestones, consistency in protocols between levels of government and between countries, and they need governments to move with urgency to save the 2021 season. No business can survive two summers without revenue. As you will appreciate, much of Destination Canada's strength is found in the relationship it has with its partners, including the provincial and territorial counterparts, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, and the private sector partners. As the interim chair of the Board of Directors of Destination Canada, I am confident our work will elevate Canada's competitiveness as a tourism destination, enabling Canadian culture to thrive and place-based regenerative economies to emerge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gomel. And with that, we will start our rounds of questions. Our first round of 6 minutes goes to MP Baldinelli. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Ms. Gomel and Ms. Walden for being here. And first of all, congratulations to you, Ms. Gomel, on your appointment as our interim chair of the board for Destination Canada. Both you and Ms. Walden have assumed your responsibilities at what is, truly during one of the most devastating times and impacts that we've ever seen on our Canadian tourism sector. I appreciate the work that you're doing and that your team is doing, and I look forward to asking some questions and working with you and what we can do about assisting that recovery that we all want to see in the tourism marketplace going forward. But as we move forward, you did talk about working with those 8 board of directors, and I was wondering if you could quickly just update, the number of vacancies still on the board that need to be filled for Destination Canada.
Absolutely, yes. So there are 6 vacancies to be filled. I was part of a committee of 4 that completed over 30 interviews during the last month. We've presented a letter to the minister with our recommendations, and that's where it's currently sitting.
That's very timely and good to know. Thank you, Ms. Gomel, because as you know, I'm from Niagara Falls and the Niagara region, and Niagara is the, Canada's top leisure tourism destination. We have some 40,000 employees, 16,000 hotel rooms. We generate about $2.4 billion in tourism receipts alone. The government just committed $1 billion for assistance to tourism. Well, Niagara generates on its own $2.4 billion. So for 11 years, Niagara was proud to have a representative on that board to speak to the importance of that sector of and our, as the #1 leisure tourism destination, having that voice on the board. And I just wanted to see if I could get your opinions on whether you believe Niagara should still have a seat on the table of the Destination Canada board.
Thank you for the question. With the committee, we were really looking for a diversity of representation across the country, looking for the most highly competent and skilled people in terms of tourism and the value they could bring. So I certainly think that Niagara is an extremely important region for tourism in Canada, and do believe that we've considered several candidates from the region.
Well, I look forward to seeing that list submitted and those names put forward, because I truly believe if Niagara is not represented on that board, then we're doing a disservice not only to the tourism industry in Canada, but to those 40,000 hardworking people in my tourism destination. Quickly, I want to shift to the domestic tourism funding that you had alluded to. the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. Prior to COVID, we were a $105 billion sector. Responsible for 1.8 million workers, 1 in 10 Canadians, and that almost immediately ceased. So can you explain how Destination Canada has been working to shift its marketing focus to our domestic travel market to try and begin the tourism recovery that's needed?
Certainly. So you're absolutely right. We've pivoted to a mostly domestic plan given the current times. We are very sensitive to the health restrictions and have aligned our activities with those restrictions as they unfold. The first step for us has really been to communicate the importance of tourism for communities across Canada and to increase that understanding among Canadians of the visitor economy. Secondly, we've begun to do more work towards inspiring confidence in travel as restrictions open up, communicating all of the safety, safety measures that our operators have taken across the country. And thirdly, reignite that welcoming spirit among Canadians for visitors. The second stage, as restrictions start to open up, will be to be more aggressive in terms of offers that we put out there for Canadians to increase conversion and really get them to book trips across the country. And then thirdly, we are still, keeping a presence in international markets to ensure that during this time we still remain top of mind and that our brand remains strong among those international guests when the time is ready for them to travel back.
And thank you for going on that one point about the continuing aspect of keeping Canada and the notion of Canada alive in the international marketplace. I was looking at your 2020 annual report, and you had mentioned you'd quickly pivoted last year because of COVID and took about $31.4 million towards national, which market dollars, and then took that and put it into the domestic marketplace. So I'm wondering this year, in terms of your investments and so on, how much is like Destination Canada putting into its whole domestic marketing campaign?
Yes, I don't have all of the numbers in front of me. If Marcia would like to weigh in on the specific numbers, I would pass it to her, or we could get the information to the clerk.
Certainly, I'd be happy to answer that. Our commitment to the domestic market this year will be about $35 million. And what we are doing is supplementing the activity of provinces that are focusing primarily on intra-provincial travel, whereas Destination Canada's role is to promote inter-provincial travel and get Canadians traveling between our provinces again.
There's that nasty stop sign. Thank you, Ms. Weldon.
Thank you so much, MP Baldinelli. We'll now go to MP Josic. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to both witnesses for being with us today, Ms. Gomel and Ms. Walden. I think we're probably all feeling that pent-up demand to get traveling, and probably for most of us that will mean Canada this year, and obviously the opportunity potentially for international travel as well. But turning to our domestic market, Ms. Gomel, you referenced your work with Rocky Mountaineer, and I think we've all seen those very intriguing ads for that particular tourist product. Could you give us a bit of your background in terms of your experience in various jobs that you've had through the years, and how you bring that expertise in marketing to Destination Canada?
Absolutely. So I have since completing my MBA, I have over 20 years of experience in marketing, working with consumer-driven industries. Started my career in consumer packaged goods with Johnson & Johnson, in Toronto. Then I moved over to L'Oréal Canada in Montreal, and then returned to Vancouver where I worked with Electronic Arts. Before moving into the hospitality industry, I was with Earl's Restaurants for 5 years, and had now been at Rocky Mountaineer for 6 years. So I've been in the hospitality business for over 11 years. I would say that having a diverse, experience in industry has been extremely helpful for me in terms of bringing that lens to Destination Canada, having worked on global businesses where I was doing marketing, in across the globe, just really understanding the different motivations of different consumer groups, having a good understanding of marketing research, which is a key mandate of Destination Canada. So that's what I bring to the experience.
Thank you very much. It certainly sounds like you'll be a great asset in your role as interim chair of the board. But given Canada's size and diversity, it's really hard to understand how one central organization can really effectively promote experiences across the country. There's so much to offer. So could you tell us a little bit more about how Destination Canada works with different regional and provincial organizations to support tourism across Canada?
Absolutely. I think that one of our key advantages is really our Team Canada approach that has really shone in the past year and a half. We work very closely with all of our counterparts at the provincial and territorial destination marketing organizations. We communicate regularly. We create alignment among our plans. So it's a very cohesive and close working relationship.
Thank you. And actually, I was intrigued about a relationship with Parks Canada. How does Destination Canada partner with Parks Canada? We know we have tremendous assets, whether they be wilderness areas, whether they be heritage sites. I'm pretty aware that actually a lot of visitors from the US are particularly intrigued to visit those destinations. And I was wondering if there's any specific partnership going on there.
We work very closely with different partners across government, and certainly the parks are a key interest to visitors. I can attest to that. Working on Rocky Mountaineer, where Banff, Jasper, Lake Louise are key assets for us. If you would like more details on those partnerships with Parks Canada, I would ask colleague Ms. Walden to weigh in on that.
Actually, I would, because my riding encompasses a very large part of the Rouge National Urban Park, which is maybe not one as well known as Banff or some of the glorious parks that we have in the Rockies. But if Ms. Walden could elaborate, that would be great.
Thank you. I'm happy to do so. We have a long-standing relationship with Parks Canada because they are such an important asset for Canada's tourism industry. And by way of example, for instance, this afternoon we are holding a national webinar. I think currently it's just finished our French version of the webinar, and this afternoon there is an English version where we are hosting Parks Canada to help share what they are doing with our industry. And so that's one example of how closely we try to work, and more we are integrating our work with theirs as we contemplate the new mandate we have around destination development to think about how we produce product in tourism that can be globally competitive, and parks is a very key part of that conversation.
Since I have very little time left, I think I'll just pass it on to the next questioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour, c'est député Lemire. Vous avez 6 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, congratulations for this appointment, and thank you for being here today. You mentioned in your statement something that surprised me. That is that you recognize that Canada was quite generous, I agree, but also quick in its ability to help the tourism industry. What I've heard during the entire pandemic was quite the opposite. If there was an industry that was not helped by the government and where it took a lot of time because programs were not well adapted to the reality of tourism, whether it be the rent subsidy or even the wage subsidy, oftentimes in the tourism industry, the jobs are seasonal and if you remember what the programs were in March and May, really, are you pleased with the assistance provided by the federal government during the pandemic? Are you afraid of a fourth wave? And how do you see the future with the possible reopening of the borders and the emergence of Delta variant?
So I would begin by saying that the impact that the pandemic has had on tourism is not an issue only faced in Canada. It's an issue that's been faced globally, and of course, it's had a devastating effect on our industry. No one could have predicted where things had gone. Certainly, it's been a challenging time for everyone. We are pleased with the support that we have received and the recognition for the industry within the last budget, which is still pending approval. In terms of where the industry is at, we are ready to welcome tourists and guests when the time is right. We are encouraged by the vaccine uptake. It's a very resilient industry, and I feel confident that as restrictions are lifted, we will be able to respond and restart, and we will be in a good position.
Concrètement,
Thank you. So with the $100 million announced, what is your plan with regards to reopening the borders? And what are the current needs for the tourism industry in Canada? We know there's a need for predictability. This is necessary. Do you feel that a clear direction will be provided?
So Destination Canada, as a Crown corporation, we are not involved in policy decisions. So I haven't been privy to any conversations around the timing of the border opens. We take our direction from the government and the Public Health Agency. So that being said, we are waiting for further direction. And we'll be ready to welcome guests and travelers as borders are lifted.
Quelle est votre opinion?
What is your opinion on the Quebec structures in tourism? We know that the 8 tourism agencies are working in cooperation even more and more, and the needs with regards to labor means that we need more development officers. Is this a strategy that you would support from a Canadian perspective? What's your opinion on this?
As I mentioned, we do work closely with the marketing organizations across the country. Our focus is really in terms of our mandate, which is to provide marketing, intelligence, and consumer research. So those are the areas that we're focused in.
Est-ce que vous avez des fonds disponibles?
Do you have available funds, or what could be done in order to encourage the emergence of these development officers in different regions, for example, in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, to promote adventure tourism, where people can have this type of experience?
As I mentioned, our focus really is on marketing and research and intelligence. So certainly we aim to experiences across the country. It's something that we're very involved in, and so that is something that we would be promoting in that respect.
Est-ce que de quelle façon concrètement vous travaillez
How are you working with the regional agencies? If I understand correctly, you have a marketing campaign on a Canadian level, international level, but do they have any link? What's the relationship on a daily basis?
We are working more closely with the regional development agencies, and that's something that I think that Marcia could quickly provide a little more context about.
Thank you, Monique. As part of our new strategy to work on destination development and the product and supply side of the tourism industry, we do have relationships with the regional development agencies right across the country. Those are still just forming up, I would say, as we develop the strategies for developing clusters and corridors across the country that can compete on a global level. And I see the red tag, so I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much. Our next round goes to MP Massey. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Madam Chair. Quite an extensive background. Actually, I've toured electronic arts when I was in Vancouver, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. Really interesting. I'm an Apex Legends player, so it's a fun thing to do on the side. But I really do appreciate the fact you have this experience because I think it is going to be about marketing in a different way, experiences for people. And I was just kind of curious as to your discussion about Parks Canada. How valuable are our parks in terms of rebuilding the tourism industry as a destination point, especially for American tourism? Has there been some new data, or is there kind of some strengths that you could see, especially when we try to build back from COVID and we do have the border eventually, hopefully, reopened? Is that something that could be exercised very successfully for Canadians to push that, especially with more people doing outdoor stuff because of COVID?
Yes, definitely. I would say our parks are an enormous asset for our country in terms of appealing and attracting visitors, clean air, open spaces. Definitely something that we're going to continue to be profiling in our marketing.
Do you, in my destination area, we're trying to build a park. The Rouge was mentioned by my colleague. It's a wonderful national urban park, the first one in Canada. It's tremendous, not only just for the local community. Other cities are looking at national urban parks. Do you suspect that would be an asset for tourism if we actually do move in that direction? The Prime Minister has noted that in the speech from the throne. But we're stealing, places like Edmonton, Windsor, and other places push towards national urban parks. Is that something that's been discussed as potential as we build these out?
It's a conversation that I myself haven't been involved in, but as we go forward and looking at it, that be considered.
What types of, input have you had with regards to the reopening of the border and the process? Right now we're still not going to see much change till July 5th, and it'll affect Canadians, not Americans. But there's been any consultation with regards to how to support the tourism industry if the government isn't changing any directions? There should be an amelioration plan for the summer. Has there been any discussions with yourself and the organization about how to deal with the consequences of not altering the current status quo?
Yeah. So as I previously alluded to, I am not involved in any discussions with the government over the border openings. We do provide market research and intelligence to ISED and the government, but really we take our direction from the Government of Canada. That being said, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we believe that Canadians traveling within Canada is a critical piece in terms of supporting the industry. It will be very, very challenging for the industry to lose a second summer. So that is really where our focus has been on, as restrictions are lifted, encouraging interprovincial travel and having Canadians experience all of the beauty that Canada has to offer this summer.
support provided to the government about, like, areas like myself, Windsor West. I mean, we're not going to be an interprovincial destination for the most part. There will be some that come, they always do, but not necessarily the volumes. And so by having no border closure changes from the current situation will probably mean a second season. Have you provided any data or information to the government about the consequences of border communities that don't have that option, like Windsor, and there's other places, of course, Sault Ste. Marie, and I can go on.
Yes, absolutely. The organization is involved in producing a large volume of data and research so that information is being shared with the department and with the government.
Can provide that information to this committee. It would be very helpful for us in our deliberations and in reporting.
We can get that information to the clerk.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Great. So we'll now start our second round of questions. Our first 5-minute round goes to MP Baldinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses again. And just following up what my one colleague, Mr. Massey, says, Destination Canada does provide some great information in terms of statistics and forecasting. And their last visitor economy forecast update in June was really more than helpful. So thank you for continuing to put that information. It's quite helpful. Now, I just want to quickly go to the budget in 2021. $100 million in funding was provided to Destination Canada. Now, Ms. Walden or Ms. Gamel, do we know, is that a one-year commitment? Is it a 2-year? I mean, is it building on the existing, what is it, I believe $96 million in funding that Destination Canada has?
If the chair will allow, I will pass that question to Ms. Walden.
Thank you. Happy to answer that. Yes, our current funding is in the order of $96 million, and $100 million was proposed in the April budget as additional funding for Destination Canada. It's over a 3-year period. It's somewhat front-end loaded, although those discussions with Treasury Board are still underway to define exactly how those funds would be spent and in what years. But I think the intent originally of the budget was to front-end load those significantly in year 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. And I just, again, I'm just following up on a line of questioning one of my colleagues was asking, and it's that whole notion about the consultation by the federal government and the information that you're able to provide them. So I was wondering, have you spoken to the government about any reopening plans from a tourism perspective and with the data that you're providing, or are they seeking any of your input with regards to that?
Well, we certainly have an ongoing conversation with our ministry on the conditions and state of the industry, on what our industry is asking for, which also some of the advocacy bodies like Tourism Industry Association of Canada are very vocal on and have ongoing conversations with ISED. We provide all of the research that is provided to our industry online and take our ministry through that. I think in the past year, we've produced 250 reports on different aspects, everything from Canadian sentiments about travel and whether or not they're willing to travel and whether or not they're willing to host visitors, to the ongoing economic conditions of various parts of our sector. We've also shared perspectives from our industry on those areas that Monique spoke about earlier around the need for clarity on what the milestones will be as our market reopens, on consistency in how we apply protocols, whether it's at the border or at individual airports, provincially and internationally, and finally, the need for urgency because summer is upon us and it would be very, very difficult if our industry is unable to have revenue driven through this summer.
And thank you for sharing that. I mean, there is an urgency here. I'm I'm fearful that we've lost another summer tourism season in Niagara with those borders continuing to be closed. And as you alluded to, speaking with both those national and provincial organizations, just yesterday's announcement, which many people holding hope may be an indication for the tourism sector. The Tourism Industry Association of Ontario just called yesterday's announcement. Chris Blur, the president, said this is devastating. It's an absolute gut punch as tourism businesses are trying to, that notion of finding consistency, timelines, a formal plan that needs to be in place. So I want to ask, because those same kind of views are held by most of the tourism organizations with regards to the need for a tourism reopening plan. So if I could ask, does Destination Canada agree with the Tourism Industry Association, the Canada Travel and Tourism Roundtable, when it calls on the government to immediately release an implementation plan to reopen our borders? It's my understanding that those plans, not only the Tourism Industry Association, but Ms. Gomel, Rocky Mountaineer, is even a member of the Canadian Travel and Tourism Roundtable. So do you share those views that we need those metrics in place and that formal reopening plan in place now?
Certainly, we think that a clear roadmap is needed with some clarity around milestones.
Oh, that nasty red card again. Thank you, Ms. Gomel. Thank you, Ms. Walden.
I'll make it up for you. I'll come visit Niagara when I can.
There we go. We'll hold you to it.
Perfect. Our next round of questions goes to MP Lambropoulos. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank our witnesses for being with us today. I'll be splitting my time with my colleague, Mr. Erskine-Smith. So my question goes to Ms. Gomel. I know that many of us have asked you about border reopenings, especially for fully vaccinated people. Currently, as it stands on July 5th, rules will be changing for Canadians and permanent residents who are fully vaccinated upon entry to Canada. However, we know that there's no talk of anyone else being allowed to enter Canada. And you've said that you really don't have much of a say in this matter, but that you provide, science and you provide the minister with information. Are you ever able to actually have a more involved role in that kind of a conversation? And my second question, I'll ask it from now, is with regards to interprovincial traveling, and obviously that's the role that you said that you play, promoting interprovincial travel when certain provinces still haven't accepted this going forward for the summer. What are your plans on encouraging provinces on opening their borders, at least to other Canadians? And in what capacity are you able to do this?
So as a federal Crown corporation, Destination Canada is not a policy-making body. So we are not involved in those questions around, federal or provincial borders. Our marketing plans are sensitive to the different restrictions currently across the country. As I mentioned, we've really taken a Team Canada approach, working very closely with our provincial and territorial partners, on working with the different nuances across the country. So that is the extent of our involvement in terms of our mandate on marketing and providing research and intelligence.
Okay, thanks. Since I only have, I have about 2.5 minutes left, so I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Thanks very much. I want to start. You've acknowledged that you are not in a position to comment on the border reopening or give advice to the government, and you're not involved in those conversations explicitly. But we obviously know that the border closure has a deep and lasting impact on the tourism sector here in Canada. You have said, your words, the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. You have said that we need clarity around reopening milestones, consistency in protocols, and to act with urgency. Well, July 5th, we're gonna say fully vaccinated Canadians and permanent residents don't need to quarantine, and there will be freer travel as a result. when we look at Americans and the importance of allowing those fully vaccinated Americans to come into Canada, I wonder if you could comment on the fact that when I look at the numbers, in 2019, we welcomed 22.1 million international tourists. And of that, over 2/3 were Americans. Over 15 million international tourists came from the United States. So if we said, as an initial phase, we're going to open our border to our American cousins who are fully vaccinated, what would be the positive impact on the tourism sector in Canada?
I can certainly attest from my own business at Rocky Mountaineer that the U.S. is our number one market. For my own business, it's also our top market for guests. So it plays a huge role. It's been a very challenging situation. I work on a business that over 90% of our guests come from outside of Canada, and we haven't been able to operate. We are looking at starting up again in July, but it will be at a reduced schedule as we're trying to make up as much volume loss from Canadians. August remains unknown. We do have a lot of Americans booked onto our train in August. So, it's certainly challenging. We're doing the best we can in terms of encouraging Canadians to travel. On
that point, pause there, because isn't it all the more important that we reopen to fully vaccinated Americans, as an example, when as of July 5th, Canadians are going to be able to travel internationally and come back, and there's no longer the same incentive for that domestic travel. Is that not of concern to you?
Certainly, we, as I mentioned, believe that it's critical for Canadians to travel within Canada this summer to support the industry.
Thanks very much. Thanks for all your work.
Prochain tour, c'est député Lemire pour 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Lemire, thank you, Madam Chair. My question has to do with the tour. Okay, so the tourism industry is asking for planning for the next 2 or 3 years in order to maintain expertise and financial support, especially the pursuit. They want to continue with the wage subsidy. I'm thinking of all the tourism events, such as festivals, that can take up to 2 years to plan ahead of time. But also, this is a work that has to be done over an entire year. You seem satisfied by the measures implemented by the government. Are you going to lobby to have a longer-term vision for different festivals, for example?
Destination Canada is not a lobbying agency. As I mentioned, our mandate is really around marketing and providing market research. That being said, we amplify and promote experiences across the country, including festivals, which are a key part of the experience that we deliver. So that is something that we will continue to support in that capacity.
Certainement, mais vous avez quand même eu...
Certainly, but you have an opinion, I'm sure. If you say that you're pleased with the measures in place, this is a type, a form of lobbying, but I will allow myself a last question. What are the tourism attractions that you cherish? For example, in Quebec, are there some regions that you want to highlight? Or are we talking about events in central cities that we see on the typical postcards of Canada? Are you going to increase diversity in your promotions?
So certainly, I think that there is a role for promoting all kinds of different experiences to all kinds of different visitors, whether it's both urban or rural. So we do aim to promote a huge range of diverse experiences. And I can say, in my opinion, as someone who lived in Quebec for 5 years, I certainly cherish both the festivals in Montreal to the mountains and the Laurentians. So there's a lot to promote.
Dans les contextes de Parc Canada, est-ce que vous allez...
In the context of Park Canada, are you going to leave a place for these parks in your promotions?
Absolutely. The parks are a big part of our promotions.
Merci beaucoup. Our next round of questions goes to MP Massey. You have 2.5 minutes.
Chair, and I'd like to continue with the challenges with the government's decision recently. I mean, it's not even based on science. Apparently, the Pfizer vaccine is going to have a different response to a Canadian versus the Americans. And now it's left border communities extremely vulnerable to waiting around month by month to find out what's going to happen next. Has there been any discussion about how there would be, I guess, some involvement or amelioration by your organization for, I guess, many destinations, and my friend from Niagara Falls will feel this, is that they're basically going to be frozen out of any interprovincial tourism for the most part. Some of it will happen, but some significant American visitation won't be there. So decisions are being made to isolate some tourist destination areas at their expense. Has there been any discussion about what to do once we finally get some reopening, and will there be some extra consideration to those that are basically sacrificed this year because of a lack of foresight?
As I mentioned, we do take a Team Canada approach. So we work very closely with the provinces and territories in terms of aligning something that would be considered.
Yeah, well, I guess that, I mean, there's not much of a Team Canada approach if you can't have American visitors and you're dependent upon American visitors, and the focus is going to be on interprovincial travel, and you're basically sacrificed at the end of the day. And I just think that if there's going to be a decision made by that, then organizations that are supported by the government and in the government is a different story in itself, need to have a plan to help these places once there is a final opening again. They're going to have to cling to their life over the next number of months. And hopefully, if they do make it through, I'm hoping that organizations that receive government funds are actually going to do things to help those areas later on, because it's going to be a terrible summer. I don't have to answer. That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's my rant.
Thank you, MP Massey. Our next round of questions goes to MP Paliev. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My question is for the, this is from the Rocky Mountaineer.
I can't expect her to do anything. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of background noise there from my friend, Mr. Massey, but I think it's Ms. Gommel. Yes. I understand that the Rocky Mountaineer is a wonderful enterprise, created this great entrepreneurial Canadian tourism experience. And then along came Via Rail using a subsidized version of the same thing, took advantage of its taxpayer subsidy to compete on the same lines, offering a comparable service. Is that continuing to this day?
Via Rail does have a service that runs through the Rockies.
And is it designed to compete with your tourism experience, or is it just a convenient way to get through the Rockies?
Right. I'm not privy to how they've designed their service. I can say that we offer a luxury world-class service that connects Vancouver through the Rockies.
I've heard, I haven't been on it yet, but I understand it's a fantastic experience. And coming from Calgary myself, and as you know, Calgarians love to invade British Columbia every summer as often as they can. So I intend to take advantage of your experience there at the Rocky Mountaineer. But I think it's crazy to have a state-subsidized enterprise competing with private entrepreneurs. And I'm not going to ask you to comment any further because I can tell that you're being very diplomatic. But I hope that in the future, the VIA will serve markets that don't already have a private enterprise doing it. The purpose of having a state-owned enterprise in this space is to correct for market failures. Obviously, there's not a market failure here because you at the Rocky Mountaineer are providing the service. Any comments?
I would just echo my previous comments that we do provide a world-class service, and I would encourage you to definitely come on board this summer.
Thank you very much. And what is your take on the issue of the border opening? You must have American customers who come and want to experience the Rockies. Of course, the most beautiful parts of the Rocky Mountain Range are on the Canadian side of the border. So tell me how you've been affected by the continued border closure.
So Rocky Mountaineer, as I mentioned, we didn't operate in 2020 at all. We have delayed the start of our season. So normally we would start in April. We will be resuming operations on July 5th, which is very exciting for us, but it will be a reduced schedule as we've really been we'll be really focusing on that domestic market. That being said, we do have a lot of Americans that are looking forward to coming on board the train that are on August departures. So we await news on the border opening and we'll adjust accordingly.
Excellent. Well, good for you. I encourage all Canadians to give the Rocky Mountaineer a look and consider spending your tourism dollars here in Canada for great companies like yours and other tourism enterprises across the land. And I hope that Via Rail will provide services the market is not already providing because we don't need to subsidize a state business to go after a private business, especially when you're paying taxes, ironically, to subsidize your own competition. So I'll leave it at that. As I can tell, you're being very cautious in your words, which I understand given your business, but best wishes for a great reopening and much prosperity to you, your workers, and shareholders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Poliev. And our last round will go to MP Assassi. You have the floor for 5 minutes. And I do not see MP Assassi. Oh, there he is. Go ahead.
Apologies for that, Madam Chair. Allow me to start off by thanking the two witnesses. I found your testimony to be incredibly helpful. You have focused on some of the short-term challenges that need to be addressed to ensure that hopefully this season we will see a surge in tourism. I was wondering, longer term, what are some of the indicators that you think members of Parliament should remain focused on to ensure that we see a sustainable recovery for your sector? If I could go to Ms. Gomel first.
Sure. So, certainly we will be monitoring things as they come. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I would say that we have made some shifts in our corporate strategy looking forward in terms of the types of travelers that we will be targeting, how we will be, our approach to marketing. So certainly we are reacting to the change in the climate. Again, we will be looking at arrivals numbers from different countries, looking at all of the measures that we did before, adjusting where we allocate dollars in terms of our marketing with different countries. So we are going to be, kind of watching and adapting. We've become quite agile, but I will, if the chair will allow, I will ask Ms. Walden to elaborate on that one.
Thank you. Maybe just at the very highest level, I'll say that we really see our role in helping our industry contribute to the quality of life of communities right across this country, while we're enriching the lives of our visitors by exposing to the people, places of our land. We have 4 pillars that will not only help us address short-term opportunities, but position us in the long term. That is, first of all, about ensuring we have the social license of Canadians to welcome visitors back into communities. Secondly, that we are doing things to increase the vitality of our industry over time. And part of that is focusing on a higher value traveler that will increase their spending in Canada and help us sustain well-paying jobs in the country. Thirdly, we focus on brand resonance to make sure that what Canada can offer as an experience remains competitive internationally, and that we have budgets that support our ability to compete on a marketing level in the short term. And finally, the fourth pillar of our strategy is really around creating legendary experiences. We have many in this country already. We want to continue to have the work of our economic development agencies invest in those experiences to ensure that we can compete, because having the right product is what will make us competitive over the longer haul. So we have a role to play now in helping strategize around that to create demand-informed strategies and working with regional development agencies to ensure that we are positioning our industry well for the future.
Thank you very much for that. And I understand, Madam Chair, that's my time. Am I correct? Because it's past 1 o'clock.
Yes, we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock because of some interpretation services limitations. So if you're okay with that, Mr. Assassi, we'll stop there.
That's right.
Thank you so much. So with that, I'd like to thank our witnesses for being with us today. Ms. Gomel, Ms. Walden, thank you so much for your time and for sharing the concerns of the industry, but also opportunities that present itself, and also for reminding Canadians, go out there, discover our great nation, spend your money here in Canada, stay safe, but obviously visit our great country, coast to coast. Make sure you have a chance to visit when you can. And with that, I will bid you adieu. But before I adjourn, I just want to say this is our last meeting before we return in the fall. I want to thank everyone, the analyst, IT, clerk, the folks in the room, sanitation, interpretation, for allowing INDU, who has been sitting consistently since February 2020. Thank you for allowing us to be able to do what we're doing. Without you, we would not have been able to. And again, to the support staff, all of our staffers that make what we're doing possible, I want to thank you, because this has been a great committee. Je pense tous mes collègues vont dire qu'on a travaillé.
All my colleagues will agree that we've worked in a spirit of collaboration.
Sometimes, but that makes it interesting. But I want to thank you all, because we've really come together as a team. We were able to produce some good work. And I want to thank you, because it's made my job a lot easier. And I promise to bring the cards back in September, because I know how much you all love them. And take some time off this summer, guys. Go visit MP Baldinelli, because supposedly he needs us to come visit him. So go and visit, and take care of yourselves. And I will see you all in the fall. And if there's any updates with respect to reports and so on, we'll definitely be in touch. With that, I call this meeting adjourned. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je pense qu'on a été le meilleur comité. Merci.
Thank you, Madame.